I will never forget the moment I returned to my childhood home in Kingston for spring break from university, only to find a for sale sign hammered into the front lawn and my belongings waiting for me in garbage bags on the porch. My father's voice on the phone was emotionless. "We moved. You're an adult now. Deal with it." In that instant, I understood I had been erased by my own family. But they didn't know that this erasure would become my vow of revenge. My name is Madison Campbell, and this is the story of how I made them pay the price for discarding me. I had driven 4 hours from my university campus in Toronto to Kingston, a sweet excitement for spring break and seeing my family bubbling inside me. But the sight that greeted me in front of the house where I grew up, every corner filled with memories, shattered all my dreams. The for sale sign, brutally staked into the front yard, was like a dagger plunged into my heart. The windows were bare, no curtains hung, no familiar furniture visible inside, and on the porch, like 3 unwanted guests, sat black garbage bags. With a cold, sharp pain in my stomach, I approached one, unfastening its opening. My clothes, my favorite books, the small personal items I'd left behind when I went to university, thinking, I'll get them later. Fragments of my shattered life, ruthlessly stuffed into those bags. How could this be? Why hadn't they said a single word to me? With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and called my Uncle Thomas. His voice wasn't as cheerful as usual. There was a hesitation in his tone. "Madison, dear, is that you?" "Uncle," I said, my voice hoarse. "What's going on at the house? My keys don't work, the house is empty, and my things are outside." A deep sigh came from the other end of the line. "Oh, Madison, your parents. Your father said you should have called first. They moved last week. Didn't they tell you?" "No," I whispered, the word barely making it past the lump in my throat. "They didn't tell me anything." At that moment, I felt crushed under the weight of those words. I had been abandoned, discarded like trash by my own family. I don't even remember how I ended the call with my uncle. I hung up and with trembling fingers dialed my father. Each ring was like torture, a needle piercing my heart. Finally, he answered. "Hello?" That familiar yet now so alien, flat, emotionless voice. "Dad, the house is empty. My stuff is on the porch in garbage bags. What's going on?" I cried out, tears streaming down my cheeks. A short pause. Then, that icy, indifferent reply. "We moved. You're an adult now, Madison. Deal with it." And the line went dead. Click, as if he had just ripped my heart out and then stomped on it. I stared at the phone. Shock, disbelief, anger. It all mixed together. I called again, straight to voicemail. I tried my mother. The same. My younger brother, Gabriel. No answer. Just like that. In a matter of seconds, they had completely erased me from their lives. No warning, no goodbye, not even the courtesy of a forwarding address. Nothing. I just stood there, watching the long, mournful shadows of the sunset fall across what used to be my front yard. The large maple tree we had planted together when I was 8 still stood tall. Its branches reached out hopelessly towards a house that no longer belonged to us. Or rather, to me. That tree had witnessed so many of my dreams, all of them now a wreck. I had sent part of my scholarship money home every month, so they wouldn't struggle. I had maintained a 3.9 GPA in my pre-law studies at Queen's University while working part-time. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never caused trouble. And this was my reward? This brutal abandonment? I didn't cry. Not then. At that moment, the deep wound inside me didn't bleed. It froze. Instead, I picked up those 3 black garbage bags and, with difficulty, loaded them into my car. That night, I checked into one of the cheapest motels I could find in Kingston. I spread my salvaged belongings on the scratchy, stained bedspread. A few textbooks, the winter clothes I'd left behind, the broken frame of a family photo taken on the beach 3 summers ago, everyone smiling, everyone a liar. At that moment, looking at that broken frame, at those fake smiles, the frozen wound inside me thawed and gave way to an icy resolve. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted to erase me, I would return the favor. I would sever all ties and build something they could never take away from me, never touch. This wouldn't just be a struggle for survival. This would be my silent, yet devastating revenge. They would understand what they had lost, who they had crossed, and by the time they did, it would be far too late for them. And I couldn't wait to see that moment. I grew up believing family meant unconditional support. My parents had immigrated to Canada from Mexico before I was born, and family first was practically our household religion. My father worked double shifts at the manufacturing plant, and my mother cleaned houses. They reminded us daily of their sacrifices. We came here with nothing so you could have everything, my father would say at dinner, looking me in the eyes. Education is your ticket, Madison. Don't ever forget it. I had taken those words to heart, to my very core. While other kids went to parties after school, I was in the library, studying. When my high school friends got summer jobs at the mall or cafes, I volunteered at the local courthouse. My acceptance into Queen's University for pre-law on a full scholarship was supposed to be the first brilliant return on their investment. I was going to be the child who fulfilled their dreams, who was worthy of them. Or so I thought. What they didn't know was that the ticket would take me far away from them, towards my own independence. My younger brother, Gabriel, was different. He always struggled in school, preferred video games to books, and had been caught shoplifting twice in high school. Yet my parents never threatened to kick him out. They defended him, supported him, forgave him every single time. "He's finding his way," they'd say tenderly. "Boys will be boys, a little mischievous." Perhaps that's why their abandonment of me blindsided me so completely. The responsible, successful daughter cast aside, while the troubled, problem child son remained under their wing. This double standard was a worm that had been gnawing at me for years. But that night, in that cheap motel room, this worm had become an unbearable pain. I would no longer be that good, obedient girl. I would no longer live according to their expectations, their unjust love. I would carve my own path, and on that path, I would never, ever forget what had been done to me. That night, in that motel room, I had made the most important decision of my life, and that decision would change everything. That night, in that cheap motel room, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a whirlwind of my father's cruel words, my mother's and Gabriel's deafening silence, and the terrifying uncertainty of the future. But amidst all this chaos, a tiny spark of hope had also ignited within me. Professor Wilkins. I was taking constitutional law with her, and in a short time she had become not just a teacher, but a mentor, a safe harbor I could turn to in difficult times. With trembling fingers, I picked up my phone and dialed her number. It was 4 a.m, but that didn't matter. At that moment, I needed someone to talk to, someone who would listen without judgment. The phone rang a few times before she answered. Professor Wilkins's sleepy, but as always compassionate voice asked, "Madison, dear, at this hour, is something wrong?" Trying to hold back my sobs, I told her everything that had happened in one breath. The empty house, the garbage bags, my father's icy words. There was a deep silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Oh my God, Madison," she said, a mixture of shock and anger in her voice. They just left?" "Yes," I whispered. "I don't know what to do now. It's spring break. I can't exactly go back to the dorm, and my voice cracked. all the emotion I had suppressed until then, threatening to burst forth like a flood. "Listen to me, Madison." Professor Wilkins' voice was calm and reassuring as always. "Get ready right now. I'm coming to pick you up. You'll stay with me until the dorms reopen. We'll figure out a solution together, okay?" At that moment, those words were like a life raft thrown to someone drowning. There were still good people in the world, and Professor Wilkins was the greatest proof of that. Half an hour later, Professor Wilkins was at my motel room door. She hugged me tightly, saying nothing. That hug conveyed more than words ever could. When we arrived at her Victorian house, filled with books and two old, sleepy cats, she showed me to the guest room. "No time limit," she said gently, "until you feel better, until you can focus on your studies. This is your home." That night, for the first time in years, I felt a sliver of safety, but the fire of revenge inside me hadn't been extinguished. On the contrary, Professor Wilkins' unexpected kindness had fanned it even brighter. I would show them, my family, what they had lost. That spring break, instead of relaxing, I threw myself into research with a frenzy. I didn't want to leave Kingston. That would be giving them what they wanted. Professor Wilkins had connected me with a summer legal internship at Riverton Law Partners, a reputable firm downtown that specialized in housing discrimination cases. The irony was bitter. I, who had been thrown out of my own home, would now fight for others to keep theirs. But perhaps for that very reason, I embraced this work with all four hands. One evening over tea, Professor Wilkins advised, "Channel this, Madison. The best advocacy comes from personal experience." I nodded, thinking about the family photos I'd found crumpled at the bottom of one of those garbage bags. My 15th birthday celebration, my high school graduation, all those milestones my parents had celebrated, only to discard the evidence like trash. At that moment, something inside me hardened even more. That night I blocked their numbers. My father's, my mother's, Gabriel's, even all the aunts and uncles who might enable their behavior. If anyone asked about my family, I would simply say, "We're not in touch." No dramatic story, no plea for sympathy. I was rebuilding from scratch, and sentimentality had no place in that foundation. This decision was the first concrete step I took against them, and strangely, it made me feel even stronger. I no longer had to wait for their calls, for their manipulations. The control of my own life was in my hands. The summer internship at Riverton Law Partners changed everything. What started as basic research and coffee runs quickly evolved when my supervisor, attorney Eleanor Grayson, discovered my knack for connecting with clients. "You have something rare, Madison," she told me after I helped calm a young mother facing eviction. "You actually listen." Those words were one of the most valuable compliments I had ever received. Soon I was assigned to assist with intake interviews. I met families being pushed out of affordable housing by developers, elderly tenants facing illegal rent increases, students dealing with predatory landlords. Their stories resonated with me in ways I couldn't articulate. In each one, I saw a reflection of the abandonment, the helplessness I'd experienced. I wondered how many people like me saw their lives turned upside down one morning. I had to do something about these injustices. But what? One evening, after a particularly grueling day, having interviewed 3 families from the same apartment complex who had all received simultaneous eviction notices, I stayed late at the office organizing case notes. Eleanor found me there at 9 p.m., surrounded by papers. "Burning the midnight oil?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "These families have nowhere to go," I said. "The developers are offering them 2 weeks in a motel as compensation for breaking their leases early." Eleanor sighed. "Unfortunately, that's often more than the law requires." "But it's not right," I insisted. 2 weeks isn't enough time to find new housing, especially with security deposits and first month's rent. These people will end up homeless." The helpless anger in my voice reminded me of my own experiences. "The system is broken, Madison," Eleanor agreed. So, what are you going to do about it? That question lingered in my mind for days. What could I, an intern law student, possibly do? At that moment, I couldn't find an answer, but the seeds of that question had been sown deep inside me. I had to do something. I had to turn the pain I had experienced into a power to prevent others from experiencing the same. But how? The answer to that question would come from a most unexpected place, at a boring university financial aid seminar I had to attend at the beginning of the next semester. And that answer would change not only my life, but the lives of many others like me. That question, so what are you going to do about it, echoed in my mind for days. The answer, unexpectedly, came during one of Queen's University's mandatory financial aid seminars at the start of the next semester. The presenter mentioned social innovation grants, seed money for students with projects addressing community needs. And in that instant, a light bulb went on in my head. This was my chance to do something. I didn't sleep for 3 nights straight. I was drafting a proposal for a housing advocacy program, specifically for students and low-income families in Kingston. So many students, so many families in Kingston, just like the people I met during my internship, were facing the threat of eviction, helplessly. I even found a name for my project, Safe Space Initiative. Eleanor Grayson helped me refine the legal aspects, and Professor Wilkins reviewed the final application. At that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt that the trauma I had experienced could be transformed into a purpose. If I got this grant, I could make a real difference. While waiting for news about the grant, those first unexpected calls from my family began. 6 months after they had abandoned me, a voicemail from my father. "Madison, your mother is worried about you. Call us." No apology, no explanation, just an expectation that I would respond to their summons like an obedient daughter. I didn't call back. 3 days later, another voicemail. "This silent treatment is childish, Madison. We're your family." I saved the message but didn't respond. The calls increased in frequency. Sometimes my father, sometimes my mother, occasionally my brother Gabriel. Their tones ranged from demanding to pleading. None acknowledged what they had done. Their audacity fueled my determination even more. I had a family, yes, but that family consisted of people who loved me unconditionally, who supported me. People like Professor Wilkins, like Eleanor. Blood ties didn't always mean real family ties. When the university awarded me the Social Innovation Grant, a full $25,000 to launch Safe Space Initiative, I didn't share the news with them. When Riverton Law Partners offered me a paid position to continue my work through the academic year, I celebrated with Professor Wilkins and Eleanor. My new family was forming around me. People who supported me not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect and care. By January, Safe Space Initiative had assisted 23 students fighting wrongful evictions. We operated out of a converted storage room at Riverton Law Partners, with 2 volunteer paralegals and a rotating schedule of law students earning clinical hours. Most days I rushed from classes to the office, spending evenings reviewing cases and refining our approach. The work was exhausting but fulfilling. Each family that maintained housing, each student who avoided homelessness, felt like a personal victory. I was building something meaningful from the wreckage of my own displacement. My family, meanwhile, had increased their campaign to reconnect. The calls came with alarming frequency, sometimes multiple times per day. When I continued ignoring them, they enlisted relatives. "Your mother cries every night," my Aunt Lucia texted. "Whatever they did, can't you forgive them?" I didn't respond to these messages either. Forgiveness required acknowledgement, and they had yet to admit any wrongdoing. At those moments, seeing them squirm in their desperate attempts at manipulation, I felt a grim satisfaction. I was no longer their emotional plaything. One Tuesday afternoon in February, I was counseling a sophomore named Devin, who had returned from winter break to find his landlord had rented his room to someone else despite his paid-up lease. As we discussed his options, the office phone rang. "Safe Space Initiative, this is Madison." I answered, gesturing apologetically to Devin. Madison, is that you? It was my mother's voice. My stomach dropped. How did you get this number? It's on your website, she said. Why haven't you returned our calls? We've been worried sick. Devin shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I covered the mouthpiece. I'm sorry. I need to handle this. Would you mind waiting outside for a moment? After he left, I uncovered the phone. This is my workplace. Please don't call here again. We're your parents, my mother said, her voice breaking. We have the right. You lost that right, I interrupted. When you put my belongings in garbage bags and sold our house without telling me. I'm not doing this now. Your father made a mistake, she pleaded. We had financial troubles. The house was being foreclosed on. We were embarrassed. For a moment, I felt a crack in my resolve. Financial troubles, foreclosure. They had never mentioned money problems. If you were in trouble, you could have told me, I said, my voice softer. I would have helped. I was already sending money home. Your father wouldn't allow it, she said. His pride. You know how he is. I did know. My father's pride was a force of nature, shaping our family dynamics since childhood. But pride didn't justify what they'd done. I need to get back to work, I said firmly. Please respect my boundaries. I hung up before she could respond, hands trembling slightly as I placed the receiver down. The brief conversation had unearthed feelings I thought I'd successfully buried. Anger, certainly, but also a lingering sense of responsibility toward them. Later that evening, Eleanor found me still at my desk, staring at Safe Space's call log. Everything okay? You seem distracted, she said, perching on the edge of my desk. I hesitated, then told her about the call. Part of me wants to believe they had a good reason, I admitted, that it wasn't just cruelty. Eleanor considered this. People rarely act from pure cruelty, Madison, but reasons and excuses aren't the same thing. Whatever financial troubles they had, they chose to handle it by abandoning you without warning. She was right. And yet, my mother's explanation had planted a seed of doubt. What if there was more to the story? What if they had been desperate? The next day, against my better judgment, I did something I'd resisted for months. I searched for my family online. What I found shattered any emerging sympathy. A cheerful Facebook post from my mother dated just 3 weeks after they'd moved, showing her, my father, and Gabriel smiling in front of a new house. The caption read, Walidarg, new beginnings. So blessed. There had been no financial crisis. There had been no foreclosure. There had just been a decision to leave me behind. At that moment, seeing those fake smiles, that feigned blessedness, after what they did to me, the last shred of doubt vanished. This wasn't just neglect, it was calculated cruelty. And they would pay for it, not in the way I wanted, but in the way life would make them. The unanswered calls accumulated like falling snow, 120, 150, 200. My parents' voicemails evolved from demanding to pleading, occasionally peppered with information about their new lives, as if we were having a normal, ongoing conversation instead of a one-sided bombardment. Gabriel got accepted to community college, my mother reported in late March. He's studying computer programming. You always said he was smart. In April, my father announced, the neighbors brought us tamales. Not as good as your mother's, but they're trying to be welcoming. These casual updates infuriated me more than their earlier demands. They were living their lives, forming new community connections, celebrating milestones, all while I was still processing the trauma of their abandonment. For me, life had stopped, while they continued as if nothing had happened. Their selfishness, their insensitivity, was nauseating. Meanwhile, Safe Space Initiative was gaining attention. A local news station ran a feature on our work, interviewing several students we'd helped. The university newspaper followed with a profile, highlighting my innovative approach to housing justice. These small spotlights increased our caseload dramatically. We need more resources. I told Eleanor one afternoon, gesturing at our overflowing intake folders. More volunteers, more space, more funding. At that moment, I realized how much this work had grown, but also how fragile it still was. How long could I sustain it on my own? I might have a solution, Eleanor replied, her usual wise smile on her face. The Watkins Foundation is accepting proposals for their annual social justice grants. The award is substantial enough to hire staff and rent proper offices. This was an opportunity beyond my wildest dreams. If we succeeded, Safe Space Initiative could be transformed into something much bigger. The application process was grueling. I spent weeks drafting and redrafting our proposal, gathering testimonials from clients, and compiling data on housing insecurity among students. The final document ran to 47 pages, detailing Safe Space's mission, methodology, and measurable impacts. I poured my soul into every word, every comma. This wasn't just a project. It was my rebellion, my cry. 2 days after submission, I received a call from an unfamiliar number with my hometown Kingston's area code. My heart began to race. Was it my family trying a new number? Hello? I answered cautiously. Madison, it's Mrs. Hernandez from next door. Our former neighbor. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I found the house empty. I hope it's okay that I called, she continued. Your brother Gabriel gave me your number. He said you might not answer if you saw their names on caller ID. My defenses rose immediately. What was this now? A new manipulation tactic? If this is about reconnecting with my parents— No, she interrupted. Well, not directly. It's about the house, your old house. A bad feeling crept over me. What more could happen with that house? Someone broke in last night. The police think they were looking for valuables. But of course, the place is empty. Your father asked me to check if perhaps you had come back for something. He didn't want to report a break-in if it was just you. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. They were still trying to control me, still trying to shift their own blame onto me. I haven't been back since that day, Mrs. Hernandez. Besides, I don't have keys anymore. That's what I told him, she sighed. But there's something else. The intruder left something behind, an envelope with your name on it. The police gave it to me since I'm watching the property. My heart skipped. An envelope with my name on it? At that house? There was something fishy about this, and it made me uneasy. What does it say? I asked, my voice filled with apprehension. I haven't opened it, she said. It's addressed to you, but it looks official. There's a law firm's name on it. Official mail at my old address? No one should be sending me legal documents there. I'd updated my address months ago. There was definitely something strange about this, and it unnerved me. Can you open it? I pleaded. Just tell me what it says. I heard paper tearing, then silence. Those few seconds felt like an eternity. Mrs. Hernandez, it's about your grandmother's estate, she said finally. Your maternal grandmother in Mexico. My grandmother had died when I was 13. I barely remembered her. Her estate. What estate could she possibly have? What does it say? I asked, holding my breath. It says you've inherited property in Oaxaca, Mrs. Hernandez read slowly. And there's a bank statement, Madison. It shows a balance of over $400,000. My mind reeled. This couldn't be right. My grandmother lived simply. She didn't have that kind of money. The letter says the property was developed after her death. Resort condominiums. Your portion is the proceeds from the sale of 2 units. I grabbed a pen, scribbling as Mrs. Hernandez dictated the law firm's contact information. My hand shook as I processed the implications. $400,000. This was an amount I couldn't even imagine. And it was appearing in my life just when I thought I had lost everything. Was this a coincidence or a game of fate? Does it say when this inheritance became available? I asked, my heart still pounding wildly. Mrs. Hernandez paused, paper shuffling. Yes, it was finalized last March. Last March. 1 month before my parents abandoned me. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't. They had known about my inheritance, and they had left me behind anyway. At that moment, the last shred of doubt within me vanished. This wasn't pure, unadulterated evil. This wasn't unforgivable betrayal. What was this money, then, that blinded their eyes so much? The Watkins Foundation called while I was still processing the inheritance bombshell. We'd been selected as finalists for their grant and needed to prepare a presentation for their board. Under normal circumstances, this would have been cause for celebration. The foundation's backing would transform Safe Space from a scrappy student initiative into a legitimate nonprofit. But I was distracted, my thoughts circling back to my grandmother's unexpected legacy. I couldn't understand how my family could know about this and still do what they did. After consulting with Eleanor, I contacted the Mexican law firm handling the estate. They confirmed everything. The inheritance was legitimate. The money was mine. And most tellingly, notification had been sent to my parents as my legal guardians over a year ago when I was still 19. They had known about this from me for months, maybe even years. And just when I might have needed that money the most, they had thrown me out onto the street. What kind of monstrosity was this? They kept this from me, I told Professor Wilkins during one of our regular dinners. They knew I had this inheritance coming and still put my stuff in garbage bags. She set down her fork. Have you considered why you work here? Money, I said bitterly. They probably thought they deserved it more than I did. Perhaps, she conceded. But hiding an inheritance is difficult. You would have found out eventually. I shrugged. Maybe they were planning to tell me on their terms, to make me grateful, dependent. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. Or maybe they never planned to tell me at all. At that moment, seeing how deep my family could sink shook me once again. This wasn't just neglect, it was deliberate cruelty. The inheritance funds were transferred to my account 3 days before the Watkins Foundation presentation. I hadn't decided what to do with the money, but its presence offered a strange security. For the first time since finding my childhood home empty, I felt financially untethered from my past. This money was proof that I didn't need them, that I could stand on my own feet, and this was priceless. The Watkins Foundation presentation was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in May. I arrived at the Foundation's downtown offices an hour early, reviewing my notes in the sleek waiting area. Our proposal requested $300,000 over 3 years to expand Safe Space's services beyond the university to the broader community. Eleanor arrived 20 minutes before the scheduled time, impeccable in a charcoal suit. Ready? She asked, sitting beside me. As I'll ever be, I replied, straightening my own carefully selected navy blue blazer. Professional, but not intimidating. The board can seem formal, she warned, but they care about impact. Focus on the human stories, how Safe Space changes lives. We were escorted into a boardroom where 8 people sat around a polished table. I recognized several from my research. Local business leaders, philanthropists, a former judge. The Foundation's director, William Watkins himself, rose to greet us. Miss Campbell, Miss Grayson, welcome, he said, gesturing toward the presentation area. We've been impressed by your written proposal. Show us why Safe Space deserves our support. I connected my laptop to their projector and began. The presentation outlined Safe Space's journey from student project to community resource, highlighting key cases and systemic impacts. Eleanor chimed in with legal context, explaining how our model filled gaps in existing services. 20 minutes in, as I was describing our vision for expansion, the boardroom door opened. A foundation assistant whispered something to Mr. Watkins, who nodded. I apologize for the interruption, Mr. Watkins said. Miss Campbell, there are some people here claiming to be your family. They're quite insistent on speaking with you. My heart stopped. My family? Here. How? They say it's urgent, he added, looking uncomfortable. We can ask them to wait until we finished. Eleanor touched my arm supportively. Your call, Madison. I took a steadying breath. After months of unanswered calls, My family had tracked me down to perhaps the most important professional moment of my young career. The timing couldn't be worse or more telling. Was this a coincidence? Or, as always, an attempt to sabotage the most important moments of my life? "Please tell them I'll speak with them after the presentation," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "This is too important to interrupt." Mr. Watkins nodded approvingly, and the assistant left to deliver my message. I turned back to the presentation, but inside, my mind was racing. What could possibly be so urgent after nearly a year of silence? These questions gnawed at my brain as I finished my presentation on autopilot, my voice professional despite the emotional turbulence beneath. I was determined not to let their last-minute maneuver ruin this important moment in my life. The board asked insightful questions, which I answered thoroughly, determined not to let my personal drama affect this opportunity. When they finally thanked us and promised a decision within 2 weeks, I felt hollow rather than hopeful. "You were excellent," Eleanor said as we gathered our materials, especially under the circumstances. Outside the boardroom, my parents and Gabriel waited in the reception area. My mother rose when she saw me, her face a complex mixture of emotions: hope, fear, determination. My father remained seated, his expression guarded. Gabriel hovered awkwardly between them, looking everywhere but at me. Even this tableau revealed the strange dynamics between them, those unspoken expectations. "Madison," my mother began, stepping forward. "We need to talk." Eleanor squeezed my shoulder. "I'll give you privacy. Call me later." I nodded gratefully, then turned to my family. "Why are you here? How did you even find me?" "We saw the newspaper article about your housing program," my mother explained. "It mentioned the Watkins presentation today. We've been trying to reach you for months." "I'm aware," I said coolly. 247 missed calls are hard to miss. My father finally stood. "This has gone on long enough, Madison. You're being childish." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Childish? I came home to find my belongings in garbage bags. You sold our house without telling me. You abandoned me, and I'm the childish one?" At that moment, the anger I had suppressed for years threatened to boil over. "We made a mistake," my mother said, her voice trembling. "We want to make it right." "Now you want to make it right?" I asked. "After a year, after I've rebuilt my entire life without you?" "Why now?" I knew the real reason behind their sudden interest, but I wanted to hear it from their own mouths. Gabriel shifted uncomfortably. "Just hear them out, Maddie. I know." "I know about the inheritance," I said flatly. At that moment, the expression on their faces said it all. "Is that why you're suddenly so interested in reconciliation? Because the money came through?" My father's face darkened. "You've always been so quick to judge." "And you've always been so quick to discard," I countered. "You knew about my grandmother's estate last March. You kept it from me, then threw me away like trash." My mother's eyes widened. "You know?" "I know everything," I confirmed. "The question is, what do you want now?" The foundation's reception area wasn't the place for a family reckoning, so we relocated to a nearby coffee shop. I sat across from them, maintaining physical and emotional distance as they attempted to explain the inexplicable. "We were ashamed," my mother admitted, cradling her untouched coffee. "The foreclosure. Your father lost his job, and I couldn't make enough cleaning houses. We couldn't tell you." This directly contradicted the cheerful New Beginnings photo on Facebook. "So instead of asking for help, you abandoned me," I stated, keeping my voice low and controlled. "We found out about your grandmother's money right after you left for spring semester," my father explained. "The lawyers said you'd inherit when you turned 21. We thought if we moved, started over somewhere new, we could fix our finances before you found out. By selling the house and leaving me with nothing." "We panicked," my mother said. "Your father thought you would be better off without our problems. You had your scholarship, your university friends." "And now," I persisted, "why the sudden change of heart?" They exchanged glances. At that moment, in those glances, I saw how desperate their plan was. Gabriel spoke up. "They made a terrible mistake, Maddie. They know that now." "The safe space thing," my father added gruffly. "In the newspaper, we saw what you've accomplished, and we realized we'd lost something precious." "Your successful daughter," I translated bitterly. "No," my mother insisted. "Our family, our connection." I studied them. These people who had shaped my early life and then shattered it. My mother looked older, gray strands prominent in her dark hair. My father seemed diminished somehow, his shoulders slumped beneath his worn jacket. Gabriel had grown an inch, his boyish features maturing. "I've built a new life," I said finally. "New connections, people who value me regardless of my accomplishments." "We're still your family," my father insisted. I met his gaze steadily. "Family doesn't put your belongings in garbage bags." Rising from the table, I placed enough cash to cover all our drinks and prepared to leave. "I don't need closure. I've moved forward. But if you truly want to make amends, start by respecting my boundaries." As I walked away, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction or vindication, but a quiet strength. I had faced my abandoners on my own terms and walked away whole. I no longer needed their approval. The next morning, the Watkins Foundation called. Safe Space Initiative had been awarded the full grant amount with an additional $50,000 for operational expenses. That afternoon, a national news outlet contacted me about featuring Safe Space in a segment on innovative approaches to housing justice. When the story aired 2 weeks later, it reached millions of viewers, including, I later learned, my parents. They never called again. Sometimes, the family you build yourself becomes stronger than the one you were born into. And as I looked toward my future, I knew I would never again measure my worth through someone else's eyes. I would shine with my own light, without seeking refuge in anyone's shadow. This was my greatest victory.